Okay, we are live for this month's edition of the Contact Center Network, and I feel a little bit like a TV host doing it on a LinkedIn Live, which is a bit weird. This feels really, really random. I don't necessarily do lots of LinkedIn Live, so if this goes wrong, apologies in advance, and please check the recording a little bit later. But today we are covering the topic of what the Chat GPT are you talking about? So we've got three wise wizards to join me to talk about that. Stop looking around, Jimmy. You know you're wise, worldly wise. And we've got around 740 plus people that have signed on to the LinkedIn event. So thank you all very much for tuning in. Even if you did join just to send me a sales message after it, it's been wonderful. So we're going to be talking about ChatGPT today and looking at all the different types of facets that are included within ChatGPT and where the practical application of ChatGPT can be used in the contact center. And we've got some really great people joining, saying hello. So please do drop us a comment in the comment section and say hello. We've got a love to see Mr. Neil Sharp and Julie Mordew there. Some regulars joining, and Altamesh, thank you very much for joining. But I'm going to introduce, before we get started, I'm going to introduce some of my guests that have joined me to talk about some of the content that we're going to be going through today. So I'm going to start in my top right-hand corner and just ask Mr. John Walters to give us a little bit of an intro into yourself, John, your background and your interest in all things AI and ChatGPT. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gary. Very excited to be here and for everyone tuning in. This is my first time to do a LinkedIn Live, so it's exciting. We are a company that has helped large brands outsource human agent support for about 27 years now. I'm the chief operating officer. I used to be the outside legal counsel to our company, and I joined about a year ago. And we have a particular interest in conversational AI just because we see it already having an impact on our business and the BPO's business that we work with, and just bringing tremendous benefit to our clients. And so we're just trying to learn as much as we can and help our clients and BPO friends navigate the landscape.
Brilliant. And I think you're going to bring a very operational lens to how we could potentially use ChatGPT in the contact center, John. So it's great to have you on board. We'll come to Mr. Jimmy Hosang. Say hello, Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Jimmy Hosang. I'm the founder and CEO of Mojo CX, formerly the modular analytics company. And we're a company that specializes in contact center software for three kind of use cases. So firstly, it's about conversational guidance and next best action. So what should you be saying to your customers, and how should you be upselling and cross-selling and offering different services? The second element is around targeted coaching. So how do we save time within your kind of operational management by getting your coaches and your team leaders to coach the right people on the right thing at the right time? And then as we developed our capabilities, we uncovered that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so we can put all of the different prompts and support to customers and to agents, but actually we needed underpinning capability, and that's where we've done our own kind of speech to text capabilities, and we do natural language processing, so we can design the best conversations, we can monitor the best conversations, and then when they go awry, we can remediate those through targeted coaching. And really excited to have the conversation today, because for the last 10 years I've been saying how stupid artificial intelligence is and how it's useless and people are completely over-egging it, and then somebody must have heard at OpenAI and they proved me completely wrong over the last 6 months. So excited to speak with Matt and John about the curve that we're going through.
Yeah, so you may be eating those words as we speak, Jimmy.
Many of them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then last but not least, we've got Matt Jones. So introduce yourself, Matt, and say hello.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be here, and thanks, Gary, for putting on the event. Yeah, my name's Matt Jones. I'm a product manager at Value Agent, and I think there'll be one or two of our customers joining today's session, hopefully. So they'll know what a Value Agent do, but for those that don't, we're a quality assurance and performance improvement platform. specifically built for contact centers. So we help you kind of understand where agents are doing really well and deserve some recognition, and where there's opportunity to improve the conversations that those agents are having with customers. And then the performance improvement workflows operate under targeted coaching, like Mojo CX. And then we've also got our e-learning platform built into the product as well. So the interesting area of ChatGPT for us today is we've launched it into the Evaluation platform under a feature that we've called Smart Score. So we've got some recent experience of actually ChatGPT and its application in the QA space that I can perhaps share some insight into later.
Yeah, brilliant. That would be really interesting to hear. And last but not least, it's me. So I think a lot of people will probably know who I am. I'm Gary Gormley. I'm the founder of the Fab Group, and we are all things contact center. So pretty much contact center nerds. If it's got a contact center in it, we're interested in it, which is why we set up the Contact Center Network, which just basically brings everybody together to talk about all things related to the contact center. And we set this up in the first lockdown from COVID, and it's been going ever since. So whilst there's an audience for it, of which there's lots of people here joining, all from Greece, from Italy, from Amsterdam, from Cape Town, we've literally got a global audience. So it's really a pleasure to have everybody join. But let's head into the meat of the discussion. And for those that haven't attended a Contact Center Network event before, this isn't your natural webinar. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk you through slides, and we're going to talk you through lots of stats and research. The conversations that we have here are very real about how things are happening in the contact center and what people are observing from their interactions with clients, from interactions with customers themselves, and from seeing the general landscape. And I like to think of it as a question time meets Parkinson style approach. So if anybody has a burning question that they'd like to talk about today, and would like for any of the panelists, given their introductions that they've done, what I'd like you to do is to drop it into the chat, and I will scroll through and I will monitor the comments in the chat, and we will pitch some of those questions to some of the respected panelists and put them under the spotlight, so to speak, and get their views and thoughts. And if you've got any observations of how you're using ChatGPT in your contact center and some of the success or some of the challenges that you might be experiencing with it, we'd love to hear about it. So drop it into the comments, and we'll make sure that we get to that. So first things first, what does GPT stand for? Can any of my panelists, ChatGPT, can you tell me what it stands for? Because I've gone and found it out.
Generative pre-trained transformer.
Did you Google that, John? It is indeed. It's the Transformers already coming to life. So we've seen all the blockbuster smashes, but now I suppose we're on the first wave of that coming to life in this generative pre-training transformer. And I think it's worthwhile setting the scene with that, Matt. And I think we talked about the different types of ChatGPT that are out there, and there are more than one, it would seem. So from your perspective and some of the stuff that you're looking at in Evaluation, what's some of the different language models that you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. So I guess ChatGPT is the one that everybody's heard of, right? That's probably the one large language model that we're talking about, and there's been several other webinars about. But actually, if you take a step back, ChatGPT is a large language model, of which there's several. So ChatGPT is arguably the most popular. There's others, business called Anthropic. They are probably one of the leading up and coming ones, which you may not have heard of. And there's some benefits of Anthropic, typically around the processing power that has. There's Google Bard, which some people on today's call may have actually used inadvertently through their own experience using Google Chrome. Facebook, Meta have their own, which the name escapes me. But there's several. It's a bit of a race when it comes to large language models.
Why is ChatGPT the one that everybody's raving about then?
I think Jimmy and John will probably have an opinion on this as well. But for me, I think it's almost had that iPhone moment. They've made it the most accessible product out there. It's literally, you go on a URL, you type in a prompt, and it can unlock this massive power that a lot of people have never ever seen before.
Yeah.
And,
So
and
Jimmy, I can see you furiously nodding there, and you're a man that gets excited about most things. So why are people getting excited about ChatGPT, and why is ChatGPT, I suppose, the most prolific out of them at the moment?
Well, it's to Matt's point, it's marketing. So when geeky stuff happens like this, like we in the community, or maybe not even us, because obviously we're kind of leaders now, and it's probably like data scientists and engineers and stuff that work with us hear about them first. Why ChatGPT is so popular is because they were smart enough to go, well, what is the consumer interface to this, and got it first to market. So the reason why it's so popular right now is that they were like, well, how do we allow people to sign up and ask it questions and get answers from it, and have real life use cases straight to market? But the reality is, as and again, as Matt said, is that these large language models are going to just be preeminent. And I think if you now look at the research, like OpenAI are actually more concerned with just the proliferation of large language models, where they just become kind of lost in the market, because the use case isn't just OpenAI controlling that information. It is, how do you deploy large language models on your internal documents? And so we're seeing some consumer facing applications about how through the use of like Google's extensive kind of article databases, or through all of the stuff that OpenAI has got, like how it can interact and process answers to questions very quickly. But for businesses, we need to take that and apply it onto our internal documents. And I think the first to market for OpenAI is great, but they've done that and signed up with Microsoft specifically because I think they're worried that now that the cat's out the bag, there's going to be more and more of these large language models, and they will lose market share.
And we're going to come to that point in a second around how we apply that to different use cases in the contact center. But I just want to pick up on the point that you talked about around worry and nervousness and anxiety, and I'm going to aim this one at yourself, John, because I think it's we've seen in the news recently, even the was it the CEO of ChatGPT calling for it to be more regulated, calling for it to be more governed, and I think there is a slight nervousness or an apprehension around how we use ChatGPT. And my question to you, I suppose, John, is should we be embracing this more nervously or with more of an optimistic mindset?
That's a good question. And to make it a pertinent answer to this conversation, one of the main concerns is hallucination. Even when you listen to people like Sam Altman with OpenAI, one of the big concerns is just false information that's being put out there and it influencing public opinion on important topics. And that's also an important concern within the contact center space. When we talk with our clients, the fear to the adoption of large language models in the customer-facing application is that it might say something inappropriate. It could say something racist or highly offensive. And I was talking with a customer support leader from ESPN recently, and he told me point blank that if that happens and it gets screenshotted by a customer, then they will lose their job. And so that's just the reality in the contact center space.
Yeah. And Jimmy, are you sensing any nervousness or anxiety in people's want to use ChatGPT? Are you seeing any of that within the conversation that you're having?
Probably depends who you talk to. So like, I think I was at an event last week where we were talking, where I went to a talk with some data scientists who work at some preeminent kind of companies, who said they weren't concerned, and they said they weren't concerned about ChatGPT and large language models because of the trust issue. But the difficult question that I asked back to those guys was, well, what do you mean by trust? And they said, well, do we trust it to build the right models, to make the right decisions, to anybody who knows how you build these types of applications? Like, I could have a data table of customers, but just by the way I manipulate that data table, I can give different answers to different questions depending on how I manipulate it. So do we trust that a large language model making these decisions with automation can make those decisions? My challenge back to those guys was, can you trust your existing data scientists not to do that? And I actually think that the wave of automation and AI is coming much quicker than everybody thinks it is. I think everybody thinks it's a fad right now and it's novel, whereas actually the results that we're seeing, and you can see things like the results that it's getting on the Harvard Law test, the results that it's getting on medical examinations and stuff. It's way outperforming the average human. And I think we're being like, there's a lot of hubris in a lot of, especially the data science community, to think that we couldn't be replaced by AI that is less biased than what we are with our own choices.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting chat in the comments section by Hardeep around some of the reactions to ChatGPT and how it's been used. And we talk about Italy banning it, and it's only really been recently put back into play. What's your thoughts on that?
Can I just have one more thing? It was quite interesting. There was a person who worked for journalism, and somebody said, yeah, our journalists are trusted. And there's been, when we've seen generative AI based on journalist reports and articles written, we've seen that it's saying misinformation, disinformation, it's saying the wrong angle. And like, for me, that's crazy, because these AIs have been trained on their articles. It's the articles that have trained these bots. And now we're going, well, they lie all the time, and they just tell the audience what they want to hear, and they're way too overconfident in the predictions. And we're like, sounds a lot like it's just general journalists and data scientists.
And like you say, with anything, isn't it? It's garbage in, garbage out. So whatever we're feeding the engine that does that is an important part. And I think that's a really valid point, Matt, that I'm going to come to you on there, is to say, right, well, actually, some of the stuff that we're feeding these engines is going to drive a right or wrong answer in some respects. And when we look at what you guys do in a quality environment and using ChatGPT to govern quality control, that can be a really risky point if we're not feeding it with the right thing. So how have you guys as a business faced off to that whole governance and that regulation piece to make sure that the content that we're giving out is accurate?
It's really interesting, actually, and Jimmy kind of touched on it there in terms of it behaves almost like a human would, and that's what we found as well. So kind of if you take a step back and think of kind of your more traditional speech and text analytics, which works typically on advanced logic in order to derive a result, i.e. it's an absolute yes or no binary outcome based on a word being heard, said in a conversation and not said, and that might extend to phrases and variations of that word, but ultimately it's kind of more just advanced logic. For ChatGPT, it's all about generative AI, and as I said, it works much more like a human would when it comes to the assessment of a line item within a scorecard, for example. So if you asked ChatGPT, did this agent show a appropriate level of empathy in this conversation, and that's all you asked it, then it may, what some would call, hallucinate and make things up, because you haven't given it enough definition of what you're absolutely looking for. Much like, and the way we're describing it is, it's much like having a new quality analyst joining your QA team. If the training's rubbish, your guidelines are rubbish, and your line items leave space for interpretation and bias and subjectivity, then ChatGPT replicates that unless you give it some really clear, good quality guidelines in order to help it make a more informed decision. So,
I suppose it removes some of that subjectivity. It removes some of that subjectivity, doesn't it, by having greater control and some greater guidelines around what you're feeding in. So I think to Jimmy's point, garbage in, garbage out can really help refine what we're looking for. And I think there's a few aspects that I want to cover here, and I'm going to bring in John on this one because I know when we're having the pre-discussion here around how far do we go with AI, and you've talked about already, Matt, in terms of ChatGPT potentially being able to detect empathy and have that kind of human centered conversation. But I think there's something in here around, can we train ChatGPT and other text-based tools to actually start to mirror a more empathetic human experience? And can we take that to the point where that might then replace a human? Contentious point, contentious topic. John, I'd love to hear your views on that.
Great question and interesting topic. It's going to get to that point, and some companies are striving for it. I recently did a demo with Simpler, which is they don't call themselves a BPO, but I call them a BPO. They're a subsidiary of Assurian, and they have some very impressive outsourcing services where they blend AI and human agent support. And they have begun using large language models to handle tier 2 type issues. Traditionally, automation has been very good at tier 1 issues, but they're trying to actually raise the stakes a little bit. And they're just now rolling this out, and we don't have any clients that are using this service. I'm very interested to have a client use that service in the future, just so I can see it firsthand and participate in the weekly business reviews and actually give some accurate feedback. But it's going to reach that point because there's so much data in customer interactions, right? You have the vocabulary, you have the tone of voice, you have feedback that's provided by the customer after each interaction. And it's in all these interactions can be transcribed into text that large language models can consume. It's going to get to a point where these machines are better at answering questions than humans. And I think it'll be a few years, but it's going to get there.
Yeah, I think, Jimmy, when we were talking, I briefly mentioned that John said ChatGPT could potentially replace humans, and you went, hell yes, I think they could. Have you got another take on that? Do you think it will? Do you think we will start to replace humans as a customer facing activity?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of evidence, even right now, that if we had the right, part of the challenge is that we struggle with the plumbing. Okay, Matt and John will have the same experiences as us. I'm sorry if there's any Verint people on here or Nexidia people or Avaya and stuff like that, but everybody siloed all of the data and all of the pipelines and all of the engineering in order to do it for their own reasons, I'm sure. But all it is a plumbing exercise. And I think there's a lot of evidence right now that if you sort that plumbing out, and if you've got like better data pipelines, better data integrations throughout your contact center, for real-time speech transcription accuracy is now getting up towards 95% if it's done in the right way. The only things that stop that are other companies and other humans, like with legacy kind of software. If you can take that and then match that against large language models, another thing's what's really important, Matt kind of pointed out, but just to be clear, ChatGPT and other large language models has variability built in. It has variability built in because life is variable. It's probabilistic. So you are going to get great conversations. You are going to get some conversations that are, I won't swear, but less than great. It's got those variabilities. If we can start to then narrow like what great looks like and what great responses look like, from an architectural point of view, like my view is that in 10 years, in fact, less than 10 years, it's not a case of, well, AI will do the simple tasks. It's actually you want your AI to do the more complex things, which requires a human, sometimes onshore, sometimes outsourced, sometimes who has a bad day, who's stressed. Like sometimes the quality of the conversations that I witness at listening from a quality perspective with humans is pretty terrible. And we kind of dismiss that because that is what it is. I think that very quickly, once we've solved the architectural problem, like there will be a case that we want our AI to do the more difficult questions. And I'll just say one more thing. Like once you've got the AI to do the more difficult questions, why do you need to queue? Because you could just speak to your Alexa app and go straight through to the contact center and have straight through to automation, like rather than being in a queue and doing voice-led IVR and all of that stuff. You could have AI like doing your simple and complex tasks at your fingertips within your home.
And John, you've got a point to make on that, so I'm going to bring you in to expand on that.
Jimmy just made an excellent point. He hit on actually where we as a company think this industry is heading, and we have not started speaking publicly about it yet. And actually today I'm going to start doing it. We think that large language models are going to become the next great user interface between brands and customers, so that no longer customers are going to be going to the website or looking up a phone number. You're going to be asking your cell phone, you're going to be asking Alexa questions, and the plugins that companies are building on these various large language models are going to be able to interact with the company's internal resources to answer the questions. And so we are making a pivot as a company to start helping brands build their own plugins and making their customer support data accessible to large language models so that customers can simply ask complex questions to their devices and have them answered and actually have transactions executed, processing refunds, changing orders, and that nature.
And I think you've touched on a really good you've touched on a really good point there. I'm just going to show this comment from LinkedIn user. Thank you very much for your question. But it's around that integration and that practical use of ChatGPT to do more things. And it's how do you evolve ChatGPT to use things like Excel for financial analysis and operational purposes. And we spend a lot of time in the contact center looking at data, analyzing data. Can ChatGPT, and Jimmy, you'll be a good one for this from a data point of view. How do we see ChatGPT fusing with other resources to help streamline how we get information to customers, departments, and other things?
Yes. So look, probably answer it in two parts. Like the first part is, as John said, allowing large language models to sit on top of your existing documents, of which some of those documents could be knowledge base, some of those documents could be, your CRM data, and I'll come back to CRM in a second. Some of those information could be financial forecasts, like the same as John. Like our company it's designed to augment the human-to-human experience, but our kind of next level is how do we build AI and reduce demand from a customer and a contact perspective through kind of that automation. And those large language models will sit on top of any document and then answer them. But the second thing is, which is much more difficult for people to kind of comprehend, because we've lived in this world for 10 years, but why do you need a CRM if you've got a large language model that sits across all of your orders and all of your customer data and is tracking everything? We've got Salesforce and Zendesk CRM and some great CRMs, and a lot of things that we've focused on over the past kind of 15 years is how can we get all of our customer data into a single place so that a human can kind of interact with it. But what happens if you had a large language model that just sat on top of everything? You had event-driven data coming from your website, you had event-driven data coming through Alexa or your telephone line, and you could just ask it a question, which is how many customers have a vulnerable indicator in the last 24 hours? No CRM, it just joins data points across different streams. Oh, you've had 1,000. Okay, I want you to outbound each one of those and get them on a call with a human agent. That's non-CRM. There's no There's no kind of middleware that's associated with it. And everything that we know is around Excel and CRMs and data warehouses and things like that. But like, why do you need an analyst to do a bit of SQL if ChatGPT can do it for you? Yeah. So I think that's how far the paradigm's going to shift.
I think it's a really interesting point. And John, one for you from Sean Moss in the comments here is saying, is anybody actively integrating an AI now in a user case? And I think that's some of the stuff that you were talking about that is on the roadmap. Is there anything that you're seeing there in particular for use cases where integrations and AI is becoming more apparent?
Can you help me understand the question a little bit? So use case, I know we read the same question, so maybe I'll just take a stab at it. And Sean, I appreciate that question. So Matt Jones here with Evalu Agent, I think their organization is in the prime time. It seems that right now with the concerns of hallucination and everybody still learning how to use the everyone is still trying to figure out how to use ChatGPT in general. In the contact center context, it seems that with quality assurance and some of these back-end functions might be one of the more useful use cases. Yeah. With the exception of, I have seen some BPOs using ChatGPT to help their agents sound more empathetic on a regular basis, especially in the chat and asynchronous and the environments like SMS. So if you're answering a lot of responses, help an agent to take previous parts of the conversation and restate it back to the customer, make it more empathetic. And so those limited types of use cases on the customer facing front, I think are outweighed by kind of what Matt's doing, where you can actually use these tools to really improve stuff like quality assurance.
And I think that's a really good point. And Matt, I'm going to bring you in here because I think that one of the biggest use cases and the applications for ChatGPT is obviously in the training, coaching, and QA space. So thinking about how you're seeing use cases or you're seeing requests from your clients about that, and how you guys have built the smart score features within Evaluation, how are you seeing that use case pan out?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the biggest thing to talk about is how it's positioned and how it's built, which is it acts as a co-pilot to sit alongside, in our case, a quality analyst, but in many other cases, an agent or ultimately a human. And I think at the moment that is super, super important because of the nervousness, the trust, the hallucinations, the unknowns that we've got across all large language models at present. So for our use case in quality assurance, you very simply find a call that you want to evaluate, you press a button, it evaluates the conversation, but then it presents its evidence and justification of why it's come to that conclusion for you as a human to ultimately either agree with and press that publish button so it's sent off to the agent, or you as a human are empowered to be able to change that result before you publish it. So that kind of human oversight, I think, is super, super important when it comes to any form of ChatGPT in the enterprise, whether it's quality assurance or whether it's using it to automate some responses back to the customer. I think Zendesk have launched a product in the last couple of weeks where it's kind of smart replies or something like that, they call it, and it's using large language models to generate a response that the agent can ultimately then approve, which is then sent to the customer. And most businesses are doing it as a co-pilot model.
Jimmy, you're obviously as a speech analyst and behavioral analyst and data analyst, etc. You guys will have seen some similar use cases, I imagine, in terms of how we enhance CX for businesses and how we help improve overall efficiencies within contact centers.
Yeah, so I think the ones that we're working on like, look, it's not a plug, everybody's doing the same thing. It is like it is a bit of an arms race, but look like for us, sounds simple, but summarization. So we can take, a 10-minute conversation and turn it into like 10 blocks and say, this was why the customer contacted, was the contact resolved, was Did they show empathy? Was there a likelihood to complain? Do a load of notes, and we can push that to a CRM. That's I'm not saying it's simple. These complexities around like the algorithms that we're using and things like that, but typically our contact centers have a 400-second AHT. They spend 40 seconds in wrap at the end of a call. We've halved the wrap. We've easily halved the wrap. You don't need wrap. Like, just get on to your next call and service your customer. Like, to Matt's point, you can validate it. You're happy with the notes that have been taken, but really all that's doing is it's optimizing the future models. It's a machine learning algorithm. So if the agent's not happy with the notes, or if the QA who inspects it afterwards isn't happy with the notes, then that just feeds back and helps us to re-optimize and reduce down. I think from a customer experience perspective, one of the things that we really like is that you can use different types of classification models on large language model to predict NPS before the customer has even given out the survey. So if you know that a customer is likely to be a detractor, on the call, we've not done any real time yet, but 30 seconds post call, we know they're likely to be a detractor, then why would you not do some outbound communications and intercept that? When we see types of activity like that going on, AHT activity, like the summarization piece is very, very tangible to businesses. Like, we can just cut out half of your wrap, just very simply. To a 2,000 seater contact center, that could be 2,000, 2 million a year straight gone. Don't need it anymore. From your CX things, takes longer to come throughout the wash. But we're seeing like quality and experience scores like increasing like by 2, 3, 4 percentage points over time, by doing these kind of like in the moment or just after the moment prompts.
And I think this leads me on to another question I had around personalizing customer engagement, Jimmy. And I think it would be good to carry on that theme, to think about how can ChatGPT further help us to improve the interactions that we're having with customers without necessarily adding a load of additional costs in terms of headcount in. So how can we improve customer engagement through effective use of ChatGPT? What's your views on that?
Yeah, so straight down the line, so things that you can do today, engineering specific, but the key to a great experience is a good conversation, is rapport. So you want to keep the conversation moving. Typically what we see across lots of contact centers, but especially nowadays, because there's been so much attrition, is you see a lot of silence time. You see a lot of going on hold, silence time, which is stopping to build rapport. If you could use the AI to analyze what the customer wants and bring knowledge-based articles into the front end that can then be used by the agent is then not having to scroll through a load of articles, go through things, or even just give me a moment and searching. That's 10 seconds of good quality conversation and rapport that you're not going to get back. So I think that's what you can do right now. I think, again, going to the more kind of crazy, like kind of world of it, is if you're then talking to an AI, if you can say, as you're calling in, all right, Jimmy's a northerner, he'll probably want to speak to another northerner. Because on a sales call, he might want to speak to a northerner. He doesn't want to speak to anybody from like this place or this place. So change the accent of the AI who's talking to him to be another northerner. Another one might be that actually this is an insurance call. We want to build trust. This is a particular accent that builds trust. Because people assume different accents for different things, rightly or wrongly. Therefore, we'll have Jimmy speak to somebody who's got received pronunciation about his insurance fraud case and things like that. And you can actually tailor the voice and the tempo based on the person who's calling. That'll be in the future. But you've got generative AIs that do that right now. that you can actually start to put together. I forget the name of the company, but you can create little avatars and create different voices for the avatars and stuff like that. So I think that'll be the future of it.
And I'd trust a Jimmy Hosang style dialect if that came through.
Very few do, Gary. Very few do.
Matt, I've got a question for you, and Jimmy's referred to the CX side of things and how we can reduce handling times, and we can create more intelligent routing, and we can do some really interesting and fancy things there. And CX is one aspect. From an EX point of view, how can and how, I suppose, are you seeing some of the benefits of employees receiving some of this feedback to enhance the overall employee experience as part of a ChatGPT application?
Yeah, sure. I think there's kind of a few ways of doing it. I think there'll be some kind of wild and wonderful ideas that may come in the future around this. I think more practically speaking, in the short term, the ones we're seeing are around feedback, coaching, and e-learning. So, for example, being able to provide more good quality feedback to that agent to help them understand how they can improve their own performance is a real good use case of generative AI. So if you're evaluating lots and lots of calls every day, your feedback quality may diminish over time because you're potentially saying the same stuff very similar over time and time again. With a click of a button, you could improve the quality of that feedback and make it more motivational, as an example. The other one is around coaching. So you're having a coaching conversation, maybe with a new team leader who's hosting it, helping that team leader maybe create some open-ended questions for the topic at hand. Again, helps the quality of that conversation, and ultimately that employee experience of coaching improves, so they're more receptive to it. And then when it comes to e-learning, just simply being able to improve the quality of that e-learning content is another use case. And then I think when you get into the realms of kind of employee well-being and engagement, I think generative AI could play a part in being able to not necessarily monitor the conversation from a customer perspective, but monitor and suggest actions from an employee's perspective. So if that employee has seen lots of kind of angriness towards them from the customer, you could detect an agent's well-being through ChatGPT and then do something about it. Maybe it suggests that the team leader reaches out and just checks in.
And I think that's a really valid point. And Jimmy talked about vulnerable customers at the top there. We can talk about vulnerable agents at the same time. And in this more dispersed world where we've got people working remote, we've got people working hybrid, I think there is an opportunity in EX around knowledge management and virtual training and ChatGPT trainers. So for those that don't actually have the internal human resource to train, actually with the right kind of framework, you can create that virtual trainer that gives you more access. And I can see, Jimmy, you're furiously nodding there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Matt's point. Yeah, I think it's absolutely bang on that. Yeah, we focus so much on the customer side of the conversation, focusing on the employee side of the conversation, and going, look, if you analyze, these are the types of questions that we've been doing in almost, I look back now and it's almost a bit noddy like of a fashion, but of all of the things that you could talk to your employee about tomorrow, do you talk about the handling time? Do you talk about the predictive CSAT or NPS? Or have you analysed the conversations that they've been having, and maybe all of the clicks of the screen that they've been having, and we've understood that they're at a high stress point and they've got high likelihood to go off ill, high likelihood to go off a trite, or to go AWOL as well. So those types of models we can then go, right, the intervention is, I can't remember the numbers, but I think it costs about $2.5 to $4 grand for attrition every time somebody tries to get somebody back in. Well, maybe that's a better conversation to have with somebody tomorrow than to talk about them being 5 seconds over on their HT. It's the automation of those kind of decisions rightly or wrongly, and look, I've worked on the phones. I've never been a team leader. Some of my team might say that I'm not the best kind of personal coach and things like that. But the reality is that a lot of team leaders and a lot of coaches are excellent, but there's some difficult conversations that you have to have with your employees. Sometimes you don't want to have them, and so therefore sometimes you have like an easy conversation. You speak to your top performer about his sales performance, or you ignore the fact that somebody looks stressed. And I think part of the benefit of this AI it'll monitor, give you 100% coverage across all of your agents, but then it can also say, we told Jimmy Hosang to speak to Gary because he was stressed. Did you have that conversation? Are we monitoring the conversation? I'd like to hear from Matt later on about maybe like the recording the conversations between the agent and the coach, and improving the quality of those types of things. Did you have that conversation, and did it have an incremental uplift? Yeah. Because right now we can push conversations and push prompts to people, but if they're not having the quality of conversation, you see drop off. And so I see how this will work in the future is, we talk about the front office, the CX and the EX, but I think we're going to start talking about the back office, like the coaching conversations being monitored with AI. Sometimes it might be it might be the case. Look, I'll give you a bit of a sneak preview of the stuff we're working on, but if we recorded and run analytics across every conversation, we could go, John is brilliant at call opening. Jimmy, we understand that you're having problems with a certain authority at the beginning of calls. Look at John's, look at this 30-second clip of John absolutely nailing his call opening every single time, and acknowledge. It's that type of stuff we'll be able to do.
And I think you've touched on a really interesting point there, is to say when you start to use the ChatGPT to canvas 100% of your conversations, and then you interweave that with other KPIs that we've got across the business, like perhaps conversion, retention, customer satisfaction, and you can start bracketing those out. You can start to really create some really valuable insights that we can direct automatically using some of the tools that Matt and the team have got, and say, right, actually, let's surface all this information to those people who might be struggling. I've got a question from the.
I think just to pick up on that, Gary, following on from Jimmy's point, I think that's where the generative AI will have a massive impact on the quality of e-learning and training that an agent receives, because there's no reason why it can't, to Jimmy's point, take John's example from a great call opening and generate some bespoke training material for that agent who's struggling with call opening, rather than just receiving a generic e-learning course about how to build rapport on a call, for example.
And I think Neil Sharp said it really earlier on in some of the comments, is to say, actually, if we're really specific about what we're asking, and we actually tell to bring real examples through, then actually you can start getting more clarity in some of the outputs that the engine is going to give relative to the improvements that you're trying to make. And I think it links really nicely into some of the stuff that's come out of the chat here. Is to say there's a user here that says asking about customer service and ChatGPT, and can give him any tips. So I'm going to come to yourself, John. I think you were in and out for a second, but you're there. And I think from a customer service perspective, and some of maybe the automations that you're seeing in use cases around ChatGPT, are there any specific things that you've seen from a customer service perspective that ChatGPT can give some either CSAT gains on, or anything that's kind of happening that's standing out from your perspective?
The greatest increases in CSAT that I've seen is through increased empathy from agents on a consistent basis. And to tie into an earlier point, when it comes to the topic of employee experience, there's a lot that can be done with the quality assurance and training and things of that nature. But something that's been surprising to see is the increase in quality of life for agents through automation of after call work and basic routine tasks, not having to switch between panes of different programs to answer questions, having it all consolidated in one place, having AI being able to help craft beautiful answers. and also just automating some of the basic interactions. I had a conversation with Brian Jeppesen at Landry's, which is a conglomerate of hotels and restaurants. And he was talking about very insightful comment that, let's say a contact center has 100% attrition, and that is not 100% of your employees leaving over the course of the year. That is 25% of your employees turning over 4 times. And when they automated, I believe it was around 30 to 40% of the basic calls that were coming in, they used Poly AI for this. It reduced their human agent attrition by 50%, which is remarkable. And so that is something that is often overlooked.
You know what? It ties back into that age-old thing, doesn't it? It's like if you've got a better employee experience and you're improving your customer experience and you're using technology to fuse that, then ultimately people are generally should be a little bit happier. They're receiving fewer complaints. The calls are a little bit shorter. They're simpler to handle, and actually you end up with a slightly happier employee as a result. I've got a question from Nick Sellers, which I think is a really interesting one, because when I did a poll on ChatGPT and are you using it in your contact center, there was a big proportion of people that were like, hell no, not going to touch it with a barge pole. And Nick's is a really interesting point that I just want to bring up, is to say, right, just focusing on this last point, is how can ChatGPT and similar technologies help convince non-contact center leaders to accept the need for change in their area? And Jimmy, I'm going to fill a little bit of time while you come up with an answer. I'm going to ask you to think about what your response to that might be. How can ChatGPT and similar technologies help convince non-contact center leaders to accept the need for change in the area? What's your thoughts?
It comes down to pounds and pence. So we don't have to look how the contact center business has been evolving over time to its detriment. Actually, like in my view, has been just on a pure cost play model. It's cost. That's why everything's been offshored. We've seen really great results in South Africa and things like that now, Philippines. But let's be very, very clear. These things are done for cost. It's to drive down a cost base. Now, I've said my piece before about marketing. This is all driven by digital marketing and people digitally carpet bombing you all the time. They saturated the market with that. That meant that the only place to go after social media marketing and digital marketing was to keep cutting your cost base. And the drive towards cutting your cost base has come at the detriment of good customer experience. All the nonsense around people want to self-serve. People don't want to self-serve. If you go to a supermarket and you hear the amount of people that complain about having to do the self-serve baskets because they've only got one person on there, and you actually wait longer, it takes you longer. People have to check that you're 18 because you've got a bottle of vodka and stuff like that. It takes you longer, but we think it's better. Oh, they love to self-serve. We don't. We made that queuing experience so terrible that we thought, well, we might as well self-serve. So it's a cost play, and therefore how this will come in, you can already see it. I'm sure everybody on this call has seen it on LinkedIn Live. Nice enlightened. Now have auto summarization, Mojo CX real-time transcription with auto summarization. It'll come with, right, I can reduce my wrap time by 50% using summarization, and I think Matt will have a view on this, I can cut my QA team in half through auto scoring. Now, I know some of the heads of quality and the quality directors won't be too happy with that, but it'll come in through the cost saving. Yeah. And once it's in, every year you'll need to realize bigger and bigger cost savings and bigger and bigger benefit savings. And I think that's how it will come in. So I think there will be a nervousness right now around getting ChatGPT in, but it will start with a drop and it'll end up with a flood.
And I think these two questions that I think we've got final time for, and I'm going to come to yours first, Matt, because I think Jimmy leads on to a really interesting point. And obviously within the contact center, QA is a cost, and generally we tend to probably QA maybe 1 to 3% of interactions. And now with the use of things like smart score and transcriptions and all that kind of great stuff. We can cover more, but we can also automate more. So does that mean that there is a significant saving to be made in QA and QA as a resource, or do you think that's going to kind of stick around and we're still going to need that QA real-time interaction?
I think it's really interesting. I think the only people that can decide on that are the people that ultimately are going to be buying the technology and deploying it, because we see lots of different reasons why people invest in QA software at present, and it's not always about cost in terms of headcount reduction from a QA perspective. It might be that they need to increase coverage for a variety of reasons. Maybe the demand's gone through the roof. They've recruited loads of new agents, so they need software to come in and support the QA analysts that are already there, rather than having to go and recruit more people into the QA team. So I think that's one important angle. I think the other thing around it, though, is just the changing role of QA. I think historically, QA analysts have been very insight driven, and that's where their role has stopped and started. But now it's evolved into a much richer role. It's actually about driving better business outcomes. So it's making sure that QA isn't seen as a cost, and actually it's seen as a value add, because it's able to impact some of those high level customer service metrics around CSAT scores, around agent attrition, around cost to serve, all that kind of stuff, and tying QA to that rather than it just being a cost to monitor a conversation.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I think there was someone in the comments there that just said around making the contact center a value center rather than a cost, which I think is an important part. John, from a BPO perspective, now I can imagine BPOs are getting a little bit nervous, thinking, is ChatGPT going to do us out of a business as an outsourcer? Do you think that's likely to happen? Do you think that's something that might start to materialize as we start to become more sophisticated with the software?
What's happening right now is that the BPOs that are fully embracing this type of technology are winning all of the digital support. So that is the email, chat, and SMS. And when I say all of it, I mean all of it. It's we have a large client that told us last week that they are migrating all of their digital support away from their traditional BPOs and moving it to one BPO that is just knocking it out of the park with this type of technology. And this new BPO, they don't even offer voice support. They've developed proprietary technology to extremely efficiently handle digital communications, and they're just focusing on that. And all of the other vendors for this client are just going to be left with the voice support. And so, and there's really not a third party technology that traditional BPOs can adopt, in my opinion, to compete with that, because it's just the current chatbot providers, they're not designed to help BPOs. And what makes these BPOs so effective that are developing their own proprietary technology is that it's changing their business model. For example, they're doing a cost per resolution pricing model, which is sometimes saving tremendous amounts of money for clients. And then also they're able to use, I call it AI assist rather than agent assist tools, where they can have a shared agents. So instead of having dedicated agents on a program, they have shared agents that are being able to answer questions on the same par and with the same excellence as internal, fully trained staffed agents at the customer's in-house department with no training at all, simply because the AI is doing so much of the heavy lifting, but they still need a human in the loop to overcome these issues of hallucination. And so the agents are just guiding the AI along. Those BPOs they're the ones that are taking your clients right now, and that's happening today. So it might be a few more years when ChatGPT starts taking things away itself. But
Really
right now, it's
interesting.
smart BPOs that are conquering the
So
space.
we are literally a couple of minutes from the top of the hour. I just want to go around the panel and just ask the question: is what is the future for ChatGPT and AI in the contact center, and just get your final thoughts around where this is likely to go. So I'm going to start with you, Matt. Where do you think, from I suppose a QA perspective, the next steps and the evolution is for AI and ChatGPT?
I think it's difficult making predictions too far in the future, just because it's changing so quickly. I mean, this technology itself is only 6 months old, so I think everybody's still finding it out. I think one thing that's quite clear is, though, I think there'll be certain use cases that already exist in the contact center today to help agents, which will become infinitely more efficient. So the process itself might not go anywhere, but the actual process itself will become infinitely more efficient, but it will still be supported and assisted by a human for a significant amount of time, I think.
You see, humans aren't going anywhere fast then, anywhere soon. No, Jimmy, how about yourself in terms of the future of ChatGPT and AI? Where do you think it's going?
I think humans are going somewhere fast. So, no, I do, and I do, and I think, and I've been one of the people like who are really against it. Like for me personally, like first of all, I think with the use of large language models that we're seeing less and less requirement for hard skills. So I'm actually the first through the gate isn't your first line support, but it's your MI analysts and your forecasters and people like that. It's those people, of which I am one of those people, because you can get better, quicker answers in a room if you run a large language model over your data. And so I think the first through the bar, and something that people aren't really talking about, but imagine if you had an Alexa device in every boardroom, where when you're on your 11 o'clock, your 1 o'clock, your stand-ups about performance in the day, you could ask it a question and get an answer like that without your planning guys and your MI guys having to go. I think the second thing is we'll start to see the emergence of AI coaches, much the same as what Evaluation do with the QA, but like across the board. So you reducing your off phone time for your agent. For your agents, team leaders, and things like that, because you can get the information straight away. And finally, my belief is that within 5 years, you will have a human to AI working across the piece on complex cases. And I do think that the bottom will fall out of the BPO market.
Oh, and then last but not least, we could have a whole new webinar on that one. John, where do you think it's going?
I honestly don't know, but my suspicion is that right now we're focusing a lot on using this technology to empower agents, because that's what the technology is allowing right now because of the issue of hallucination. But I think we are going to reach a point where it's going to be focusing more on empowering customers, so that the customers are going to be able to directly interact with large language models to solve all of their customer support issues directly with the large language models. But that's going to take a few years.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. And I think Jimmy said it earlier around how we can start to manage that customer contact demand by allowing the customer to do and interact with the contact center how they want to interact. So it's not necessarily going to be a human interaction, or it could feel like it's a human interaction. You just don't know. And I think that's where it's going to get really sophisticated really quick. And to Jimmy's point, it could be that people we say farewell faster than we think. But listen, we are 2 minutes over, so apologies for that. But it was a really interesting debate and discussion, and some of the comments in the chat were really some really great and intelligent questions. And really thank you very much for everybody for getting so involved. I'm going to end the LinkedIn Live broadcast here. I'm going to ask for my panelists just to say for 60 seconds more. But I will see everybody on the next Contact Center Network, and we'll probably do it as another LinkedIn Live because I'm getting a bit comfortable with it. So we'll see you all there, and thank you very much for joining and tuning in. Take care. Speak to you all soon.